The NBA has always sold one simple promise to every kid who picks up a basketball and dreams of making it to the league. You earn your spot. You grind through high school. You shine in college or overseas. You prove you belong. You work harder than everyone else. You sacrifice. You compete. And if everything lines up, if you're good enough and lucky enough, you hear your name called on draft night. That's the deal. That's the tradition. That's how the league built its reputation as a meritocracy where talent wins and hard work pays off. But what happens when the biggest star of this generation operates like those rules don't fully apply to his own son? What happens when LeBron James, one of the most influential athletes in the history of sports, uses his leverage to get his son drafted, despite questions about whether that kid is actually ready for the NBA? Welcome to the Bronny James saga, and welcome to the explosive rant that Rob Parker just delivered that has the entire sports world talking. Rob Parker didn't hold back. He went on air and said something that a lot of people have been thinking but were too scared to say out loud. He said, "I refuse to sit here and act like it's okay." He said nepotism isn't right, that it's a disgrace, and that it doesn't matter if it's Little League, high school, college, or the NBA. When someone gets a spot because of who their father is instead of what they can do on the court, that's wrong. And he made it clear that he's not backing down from that position, no matter how much backlash he gets. This isn't just basketball chatter anymore. This is about fairness. This is about legacy. This is about whether LeBron James is getting grace and special treatment that nobody else in the history of sports would ever get. And it's about whether we're willing to admit that the system we thought was based on merit is actually based on connections, power, and leverage. Let's start with Bronny James and how he ended up in the NBA in the first place. Bronny was drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers in the second round of the 2024 NBA draft with the 55th overall pick. That's the second round, near the very end of the draft, where teams take flyers on guys who might develop or might never play a meaningful minute. And to be fair, second-round picks are lottery tickets. Sometimes you hit, most of the time you don't. But here's where the story gets complicated. Bronny James averaged 4.8 points per game during his one season at USC. He shot poorly. He didn't look ready for the NBA level. He looked like a kid who was still adjusting to college basketball, let alone professional basketball. And yet, the Lakers drafted him anyway. Why? Because LeBron James made it very clear that he wanted to play with his son before he retired. And when someone with LeBron's influence, someone who has made the NBA billions of dollars, someone who is a global brand all by himself, when that person says, "I want something," teams listen. The Lakers didn't draft Bronny because they saw the next great NBA guard. They didn't draft him because his college film screamed, "Can't miss prospect." They drafted him because keeping LeBron happy means keeping LeBron in Los Angeles. And keeping LeBron in Los Angeles means selling tickets, getting TV.
LeBron James, does that give him the right to bend the rules in a way that no other player in NBA history has been allowed to? Rob Parker compared Bronny's situation to Michael Jordan, and this comparison hits hard. Michael Jordan owned the Charlotte Hornets for years. He had complete control over that franchise. He could have drafted his sons, Marcus and Jeffrey Jordan, to play for the team. Both of them played college basketball. Neither of them projected as NBA-level talent, but Jordan could have forced the issue. He could have used his power and influence to get them on the roster. But he didn't. He drew the line. He understood that doing something like that would compromise the integrity of the league and damage his own legacy. And Rob Parker is holding that up as the standard. He's saying that's what real integrity looks like. That's what it means to respect the game. And by that standard, LeBron James falls short. Now let's talk about what we've actually seen from Bronny on the court, because performance matters. During the 2024-25 season, Bronny appeared in 27 NBA games. He averaged 2.3 points per game. He shot 31.3% from the field and 28.1% from three-point range. Those are not good numbers. Those are not even promising numbers. Those are numbers that suggest a player who is not ready for NBA competition. And in the first half of the 2025-26 season, the numbers didn't improve. Bronny is averaging 1.7 points per game on 37.2% shooting. He's been bouncing back and forth between the Lakers and the G League so often that it's become a punchline. He's not explosive. He's not a knockdown shooter. He's not running an offense. He's a 6'2" guard with solid defensive effort and an offensive game that is still trying to find its footing. Now, to be fair, Bronny's journey hasn't been typical or easy. He experienced a cardiac arrest during his college career at USC. That's a life-altering event. That's serious. That kind of health scare impacts your development in ways that people don't always see. It deserves respect. It deserves patience. But even with all of that context, when you look strictly at the numbers and the production on the court, nothing suggests that Bronny is fully NBA ready right now. And that's Rob Parker's point. If Bronny James was Bronny Smith, if his last name was anything other than James, would he have been drafted? Would he be on an NBA roster? Or would he be grinding in the G League or playing overseas trying to prove himself? Parker says the answer is obvious, and he's not willing to pretend otherwise just because LeBron is involved. But here's where the conversation gets even more complicated, because Rob Parker didn't stop with Bronny. He also brought up Danny Ainge and his son, Austin Ainge. In early June 2025, Danny Ainge, the CEO of the Utah Jazz, hired his son, Austin Ainge, as the president of basketball operations for the
Austin got his first NBA break while his father was running the Celtics, and now he reunites with him again in Utah as the president of basketball operations. Yes, the experience checks out on paper, but the look, the appearance, the perception, that's tough to ignore, and that's where Parker draws his line. So now the question becomes uncomfortable. Why does one situation feel louder than the other? Why is Bronny James the poster child for nepotism, while Austin Ainge seems to fly under the radar? Is it because one job is on the court, where performance is visible and measurable, while the other is behind a desk where results take years to evaluate? Is it because LeBron James is a bigger lightning rod and a more controversial figure than Danny Ainge could ever be? Or is there something deeper going on? Rob Parker thinks there is, and he's not afraid to say it. Parker argues that sports are supposed to be different from every other industry. This isn't corporate America. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't an industry where who you know matters more than what you can do. Sports are supposed to be pure. Sports are supposed to be about earning it, about performance, about undeniable talent that speaks for itself. That's the backbone of his argument. He believes that once you start bending the rules for family ties, once you start letting fathers pull strings for their kids, the system doesn't look pure anymore. The foundation weakens, the integrity crumbles, and the promise that hard work alone can get you there becomes a lie. Parker even brought up history, and this is where the conversation gets really uncomfortable for a lot of people. He said that nepotism has historically been one of the biggest barriers for Black Americans trying to break into powerful industries. For decades, old boys networks controlled access to jobs, to opportunities, to positions of power. Jobs were passed through family ties, through private circles, through alumni connections. If you weren't in that loop, if you didn't know the right people, you weren't getting through the door. That history is real. That history is documented. And Rob Parker's point is that when he sees LeBron James using his influence to help his son land in the NBA, he views it as a dangerous signal. He sees a system that once excluded Black Americans now being used by one of the most powerful Black figures in sports to benefit his own family. That's his perspective. You don't have to agree with it, but you can't pretend the conversation doesn't matter. Now, let's talk about the most common defense of the Bronny James situation, because it's a defense you hear all the time. People say, come on, it's the 55th pick. Nobody in the second round pans out anyway. Why does it matter? Who cares? And yes, there's some truth there. Second-round picks are low-stakes gambles. Most of them never become meaningful NBA players. But just because second-rounders usually flame out doesn't mean you should use the pick as a family favor. There are undrafted free agents who have been grinding for years, waiting for one shot. There are international players trying to break through. There are G League standouts who have proved themselves season after season. And you're telling me that Bronny James, who averaged less than 5 points per game at USC and looked like he was still adjusting to that level, deserved that roster spot over all of them? That's where the logic falls apart for critics like Rob Parker.
And here's the other piece that people don't want to talk about. When a Western Conference executive predicts that Bronny will get 10 to 15 minutes per game next season, that's not based on performance. That's based on politics. That's based on keeping LeBron happy. That's based on protecting a superstar's final chapter. And that's exactly what Rob Parker is calling out. He's saying that once you start making decisions based on who someone's father is instead of what they can do, you're no longer operating a meritocracy. You're operating a system based on power and influence, and that's fundamentally unfair to everyone who doesn't have those connections. Rob Parker also said something that a lot of people don't want to hear, but it's worth thinking about. He said that nepotism is a disservice to everybody who puts on a uniform and has to compete for a spot. He said it happens all the time with coaches, with front office staffers, with executives, with lawyers, with all.
And he's right. Nepotism is everywhere. It's baked into American life. Your dad knows someone who knows someone, and suddenly you've got an internship. Your mom went to school with somebody who opens a door for you. That's how the world works. Everybody knows someone who got a job because of a connection. Everybody knows a story where a parent made a call and the door opened. But Rob Parker's argument is that sports are supposed to be different. When you're fighting for a roster spot, your last name shouldn't carry weight. Your connection shouldn't buy you minutes. What should matter is simple. Can you guard your matchup? Can you knock down an open three? Can you make a play when the game is on the line? Parker isn't even defending nepotism in business. He says it's wrong there too. But in sports, he says it hits harder because you're messing with competitive integrity. You're touching the core of what makes the game respected. You're telling kids that hard work matters, that talent wins, that anyone can make it if they're good enough. And then you turn around and give a roster spot to someone because of who their father is. That's the hypocrisy Rob Parker is calling out, and it's a hypocrisy that's hard to defend. Now, let's be honest about what's really happening here. LeBron James is one of the greatest players to ever touch a basketball. He's made the NBA billions of dollars. He's lifted franchises. He's a global brand. And when someone of that stature says, "I want to play with my son before I retire," teams are going to listen. The Lakers didn't draft Bronny because they see the next superstar. They drafted him because keeping LeBron happy is good business. That's leverage in action. That's power being used. And from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense. But Rob Parker's question is sharper than that. Just because you can bend the system, does that mean you should? Just because you have the power to do something, does that make it right? Once you start adjusting standards for superstars, where does the line stop? What happens when the next generational icon wants to bring along someone who isn't ready either? Do we keep sliding the bar lower and lower until the whole thing loses meaning? Rob Parker says absolutely not. He's drawn the line right here, right now with Bronny James and LeBron James, and he's willing to stand on that hill by himself if he has to. He's not worried about being popular. He's not worried about the backlash. He's saying what he believes, and he's saying it loudly. And whether you agree with him or not, you have to respect the fact that he's willing to have this conversation when most people in sports media won't touch it. So where does all of this leave us? Bronny James is on the Lakers. That's reality. He's in his second season, still bouncing between the NBA and the G League. Executives still believe rotation minutes could come eventually. Meanwhile, Austin Ainge is running basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. That's set in stone too. Nepotism in sports isn't disappearing. It's profitable, it's convenient, and most fans don't push back hard enough to change it. But maybe they should. Because every time a roster spot goes to someone's son instead of the most qualified player, someone else's opportunity disappears. A player who trained for years, who went to every camp, who played overseas in near-empty gyms chasing one shot, who sacrificed everything for a chance. That player might never get it. Is that fair? Rob Parker says no. And even if you don't agree with every angle he takes, it's tough to dismiss the core question. Sports are supposed to be about merit, about earning it, about performance deciding your future. But maybe that image was always idealized. Maybe the NBA, like every other major industry, bends toward power, connections, and leverage. If that's true, then we need to stop pretending it's pure competition. We need to stop telling young athletes that hard work alone guarantees the door will open. Because in today's NBA, who your father is can matter just as much as how you play. That's the uncomfortable reality Rob Parker just forced the basketball world to confront. And whether people like it or not,
This conversation isn't going away anytime